appear. Silently now I wait for thee, ready, my God, thy will to see. Open my ears, illumine me, Spirit divine. Open my mouth and let me bear gladly the warm truth everywhere. Open my heart and let me prepare love with thy children thus to share. Silently now I wait for thee, ready, my God, thy will to see. Open my heart, illumine me, Spirit divine. Our next song will be 508, Anywhere with Jesus, I Can Safely Go. 508. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere he leads me in this world below. Anywhere without him dearest joys would fade. Anywhere with Jesus I am not afraid. Anywhere, anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere with Jesus I am not alone. Other friends may fail me, he is still my own. Though his hand may lead me over dreary ways, anywhere with Jesus is a house of praise. Anywhere, anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere with Jesus I can go to sleep. When the gloomy shadows round about me creep, knowing I shall waken never more to roam. Anywhere with Jesus will be home, sweet home. Anywhere, anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. How's everyone doing today? Happy Sabbath. Okay, well, today's our third evening. Our topic is going to be in regards of how to prevent cancer, and also, if you do have cancer, how you can work with it in a natural way. So we appreciate Ricky Perea. He has been giving us these presentations. How many of us have been blessed? Thank you. Appreciate you. I want to give out, but I would like to ask, and sorry that I do this publicly, okay? Richard and Marianne have been with us for several months, and I already consider you guys part of our family, okay? I think God brought you here. And I'd like to ask, would you like the DVD or would you like the book recipe? The recipe, okay. Can I have one of the young people come and take, can you come please, Kristen? Take this to them in the back, please. Thank you. Right here. Okay. So I still have the DVD. It's good to still have something to give out. I just want to leave this thought with you. It doesn't matter how, sometimes tribulations come to our lives in many ways. Sometimes it can be a disease, or sometimes it could be something else. But something that I've learned is that God never permits difficult things to come into our lives unless He knows that this is going to do something for us, to prepare us for His soon coming. And as I was thinking about, things that I have to go through in my own life and with my own family, but I see how God has helped me in the past, I say, thank you, God, because I'm not alone. And you continue to help us. And you will continue to help us until you return. So that's very encouraging for me. And I just want to leave you that thought, because sometimes we see people come here, but we don't know what's going on inside. Sometimes we see smiles, but we don't know what's going on deeper. But I just want to let you know that we have someone that loves us and has promised to be with us, not only today, but until Jesus Christ returns. That's the great hope that we have. Okay? So just, keep that in your heart. And I want to invite Ricky, as he's going to have today's presentation. May God bless you and use you again. Thank you.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. All right, microphone on. Okay, great. Well, I have been blessed by being here every night. I just find it kind of neat. Every time I go in to study some of the things that I once studied before in the past, and you know how that goes, you often forget some things. It's just been a blessing to me to go back and look at these things again, right? All right, what is one of the main things that we've been covering every night? Well, I know, Ernie. How the body works. Thank you, Penny. I think Ernie's still thinking about the honey he had last night. He's waiting. What is he going to bring tonight? No, we don't have any honey today or any honeydews. I'm going to give you a lemon, Ernie. No. Okay, so tonight is the answer to cancer, but I want you to think about this one more time. When it comes to health, when it comes to the anatomy and physiology of it all, okay? Because I think in regards to cancer, this is going to give you answers. This is going to give you a way of thinking about things, think about them before, right? And so this is what we're going to cover. And what is cancer, right? What in the world is this thing called cancer that just about the entire world is terrified? I've been in moments where I was in the office, and probably one of the hardest things that I would have to do is tell someone, hey, you have cancer. You know how hard it is to tell someone that? I mean, I don't even have the words to say, right? Some people take it amazingly well. Maybe because they're in front of me, maybe they get home and all of a sudden they just break down. And some people right in front of me break down in tears. Others are a little bit more hopeful, So there's a different mixed reactions when you tell someone, hey, you have cancer. Cancer encompasses basically a large group of diseases, actually, okay? There's about 100 different types or more, right? And the idea is, just get this in your mind, the idea really is an abnormal growth process within the cells, okay? It's really all that is. So, yes, it's cancer, but let's look at it in a more simplistic way. An abnormal cell growth, okay? And it can start anywhere in the human body. But the core is these cells are growing abnormally, right? So I want to look at this. This is, I don't know if, I guess we took this. I know there's some individuals in high school that take this. How the cell divides, right? How do you get cells to convert into another cell? And this is a beautiful process, by the way. It's an amazing process. It's amazing because of how microscopic that is, right? All these different things have to function at the precise amount of time just to get 2 cells, right? And our body's really good about anytime there's a need, anytime there's another cell that wants to come up, it divides itself and produces what they call a daughter cell. And the DNA within that has to come together, and then all of a sudden you see this split, right? Now think of all the different things inside that cell. Does anybody remember Anatomy 101? Any part, do you remember any part of that cell? Someone say one part of that cell. Nucleus. Everybody's, oh yeah, the nucleus, of course. That's an easy one. All right, give me a tougher one. What's another part of the cell that you remember back in Anatomy 101? That was it, huh? That's the nucleus. That's the one I remember too all the time. The nucleus, right? Well, there's all kinds of things like mitochondria and you got ribosomes and the endoplasmic reticulum. Oh boy. That was the one that you remember, right? Endoplasmic. I used to think they were talking Chinese when I took that class. But this is so amazing. Now, here's the thing. There are many highly specialized cells in your body. Can you name one cell of your body that's specialized? Come on now. Just think of how many doctors there are. Okay? How many doctors are there? There are eye doctors. Okay, so there's cells in the eye. There are cardiac cells, we call, right? There's a brain doctor, right? Neurologist. There's neurons, right? What else? Huh? Urology. Oh boy, the guys are scared about that one. Okay. So if you think about all these cells, there are some cells that don't need to replicate. Can you think of a cell that doesn't need to replicate when it's mature? I'm testing your Anatomy 101 here. What do you think? Neurons. Neurons, when your neurons mature, they don't need to replicate. They're there. That's why it's so important to keep the ones you have, right? Don't do drugs, right? Keep the neurons you got. The other one is your heart muscle cells. They don't need to replicate. This is why, because there's not a replication process, this is why you don't really hear so much about heart cancer, right? Has anybody ever heard of a heart cancer? There are some, but it's typically something that comes from somewhere else. Like you get a sarcoma or a cancer in the muscle and it spreads to the heart because the heart is a muscle, right? But you don't really see a primary lesion in the heart that they would call heart cancer. Why? Because there's no replication of the cells. Same thing with the brain. The neurons, you don't see a neuron cancer. You do see brain cancers because there's other cells in your brain, but they could also most likely be coming from somewhere else. Usually there's metastasis to the brain or another tumor or another cancer that goes and travels to the brain. Now, you also have some cells, right, that replicate quite often, right? Can you think of a cell that replicates quite often? Skin, yeah, skin. Do we hear of skin cancer? Yeah, of course. What about your intestinal tract, right? That's constantly having to replicate and produce new cells because there's constantly acid and bile and all these kinds of things that could damage cells, right? So you have a lot of turnover of cells. But there's some that are slower in replication, like your liver cells and lung cells and kidneys and bones and those kind of things, right? Okay, so again, that's why you don't always see a primary heart cancer or primary neurological cancer. Now, normal cells have a very ordered, strict life, and I like to thank our Creator for that, right? Our Creator is wonderful in its organization, right? Because the cell has to obey rules. If it doesn't obey the rules, a lot of times it have some damage to it. So cells grow, they divide, they age, they die, they get replaced, right? Sounds familiar. Sounds like the life cycle, right? They grow, they divide, they multiply, who knows? Okay, whatever. Okay, how cancer actually starts. How does this actually begin, right? Because this is what we want to know. This is how we want to find out. So everybody knows about the nucleus, right? Here's the cell. It's a beautiful cell. Inside that cell is something called the nucleus, which houses what? Come on, y'all. What does it house? What's inside that nucleus? DNA. That's right, DNA. Think about it like the sanctuary, right? You got the outer court, and then you got the most holy place, the holy place, and the most holy place, right? Think of it that way. Now, the DNA is all the information that makes that cell function. Did you know that every cell has the DNA, or every cell has the DNA of other cells? So your bone cells have DNA that's similar to what your cardiac cells are, but there's things that are switched on and switched off to make them specialized, right? All the information's there, right? But what happens when something goes awry in that DNA, in that cell, and all of a sudden you get this multiplication of cancer cells? All right, so this is kind of what we call the process of carcinogenesis, right? Carcinogenesis, kind of a long word, but all it means is like, okay, here's a normal cell, right? Very pretty, working fine, working just great. All of a sudden, something happens to that DNA. Something happens to that genetic makeup, okay? Something is very different in that DNA. That cell, and because it stops obeying the rules, all of a sudden you get multiple replication of a cell that is not normal, if you will. So the damage starts right there at the DNA level, and then it multiplies, and we have two cells that are now damaged in the DNA level. Does that make sense? All right. They transform and can transform later on to something called cancer cells. Now, what in the world? So you're probably asking, okay, what then can damage the DNA? Because that's what you want to get, right? If you want to avoid cancer, you have to start avoiding the things that can damage DNA in the cells, right? Right? That's what makes it simple. All right, what are the things that can damage DNA? So here are some of the things, just to give you an idea of the whole process, right? So we got a cell, it's multiplying, it's replicating, it's doing all it needs to do, but we get a chemical exposure to that cell. Maybe it's radiation or UV exposure. Maybe it's a chemical like the pastor was talking about. Certain drinks may have chemicals in it, right? Certain things that we use, maybe like a Roundup or something, it has a chemical. We get an exposure. That chemical will then cause a damage to that DNA. And the cell has a wonderful way of trying to get control of things. It doesn't just go rampant like that. When a DNA gets injured, or when a DNA starts getting manipulated or mutated, they call it, right? One of three things can happen. One, the cells will be able to fix it. That's kind of nice, right? It's kind of like asking Ernie, whenever you have something wrong, hey Ernie, come fix this thing for me, right? Right? Here comes Ernie and he fixes the cell, right? It's all better now. The cell goes back to being a normal cell. The DNA comes back and it's all fixed. I'd like to say that's God's handiwork. That's why I put a little hand there, right? God's handiwork. He has somehow or another, he fixes that DNA. Unfortunately, if it doesn't get fixed, one of the ways that the cells will actually help the rest of the body is that cell goes into self-destruct mode, right? Self-destruct. Have you ever seen the movies where it says, this thing will self-destruct in 5, 4, 3, right? And everybody's walking around and running around trying to see what's going on. So the cell has this thing called apoptosis, which actually means the cells will actually rupture and die on their own because they know there's something wrong. But unfortunately, there's a process called carcinogenesis where the cell continues to be mutated and then begins to replicate and replicate and replicate. So this is what we call this process called carcinogenesis. Again, here's the beginning part. There is a mutation or something that hits the DNA and it causes damage to that DNA, damage to some critical genes, and it can be caused by external factors like tobacco. Sometimes it's internal factors like the way it's copying itself, the way it's splitting. You know, there's different ways that it could happen when that cell division occurs. Are you guys with me so far? Okay? So all we're doing is, okay, why is this cell going rogue, right? Now, if you look at this might be an intense graph, but let's start over here. All it takes is one cell to have a mutation. Now, again, the body can fix it, or it can kill the cell, right? The self-destruct mode. Or it stays alive, and then what happens? It replicates, right? Especially when the toxin or the agent that caused the DNA mutation is still present, right? All of a sudden, you have this cell that replicates. Now, again, this cell replication may not be what we call cancer yet, but it is certainly a different cell, right? Sometimes the cell gets bigger. Sometimes the cells look a little different. They just don't look normal anymore. And then they begin to replicate, and it becomes something like hyperplasia or dysplasia, where there's something really different going on in that cell. These are medical terms, so we don't have to focus on that very much. But then we end up starting to see cancer, and then we see it gravitating and moving on to something it wants. It's leaving the boundaries, if you will. And if you look at these dysplasia, that means there is no brakes on the mutation. There is no brakes on the growth. Now, usually, if I have, let me ask Ricardo, Christian, and Abigail, come up here for me. And I know I'm probably getting out of the screen now, so Tim is probably going crazy back there. Okay, all right, so we have Abigail right here. We have Ricardo. I'm so glad my children are here with me today. And then we have Christian, right? Okay, all right. So here we are together. We can't move. We're kind of in this mix, right? Let's say I happen to get some inflammation and I'm out of the picture, right? What's behind now? What's there now? There's a space. There's a lot available, right? So these cells communicate with each other and they say, hey, there's some right here. What are we going to do about this? So Abigail decides to divide. And here she is, a new cell, right? There's two of them. There's two Abigails now, right? No. There's two daughter cells now, right? But what cancer does, it doesn't play by the rules, right? Come here, girls. Come on up. All right? So all of a sudden, cancer cells come up and they say, nope, I'm going to go right here, right? Right? And then you come over here and I'm going to go right here, right in front of you. And all of a sudden, what's going on? hey, there's no space for us, right? But they don't care. They grow and they grow and they grow because they don't have any breaks. And that's the problem with these cells. Okay, go ahead and have a seat. Thank you so much for helping me out. Okay, so they grow and they grow and they grow. And this is where it becomes a lesion. And you can see it right here. Now, that was stage one is called the mutation or the initial mutated gene. Stage two would be of carcinogenesis is like, okay, now it's promoting, now it's growing, now it's multiplying, right? And then, of course, stage three of carcinogenesis or becoming a cancer is now I'm going to evolve into tumor cells accumulating, and all of a sudden it wants to invade places that it shouldn't invade. Now it wants to go beyond the limits of where it started, and it wants to go into other tissues or surrounding tissues, including what we call metastasis, right? And metastasis is basically when that cancer cell, as it's mutating, as it's multiplying, you could see it might end up in something called the lymphatic system or the bloodstream, right? And that mutated cell says it gets a free ride. And it goes all through your bloodstream and it ends up somewhere else. And that's called the third stage of this carcinogenesis progression. Now, metastasis is where one of those cancer cells ends up in a place where it didn't originally start. Where's one place that a lot of cancer likes to go to? What do you guys think? Liver, yeah, the place where it supposed to filter things out, right? A lot of places like colon cancer, they like to go to the liver. So metastasis is a cancer cell that breaks away from the original primary site and travels through the bloodstream into the lymphatic system or the bloodstream, and it ends up in places you don't want, right? And if you look at this, the cancers are likely to metastasize to these different places. And you look at this mechanism of metastasis. So you let's say you have original cancer in the kidney. It could, through the blood vessels, metastasize, or even through the lymphatic system, metastasize all the way to your liver, and then you get another site there, right? Can you see now why early detection is probably the most critical here? Oh, yeah. Early detection of tumors, or even if it was just like this dysplastic where a bunch of cells are multiplying on top of each other, this is early detection that you really want to see. You want to be able to catch that. That's why people do a pap smear. Any girls have pap smears still? Yeah, pap smears, right? Maybe a prostate exam or even a breast exam. Why? They want to see if there's any growths in the tissue, okay? So early detection is one of the most important things. Now we're talking about the staging of cancer, okay? So as you can see, stage 0, this is colon cancer. This is stuff that I look at a lot, or I see most common. And if you look at this, stage 0 would be a precancerous or abnormal cell growth. We call that in our division, in our gastroenterology, we call that a polyp, right? Anybody have polyps removed from their colon? Okay, it's a growth, right? It's a growth. It's an abnormal growth, okay? And then, unfortunately, that can grow into a small tumor, right? Stage 1, a cancer. And then once it starts growing into places it's not supposed to go, you got stage 2. Stage 3, it's already outside of the colon. It's probably into a lymph node, right? And stage 4, it's in another organ. That's how you kind of stage these things. Now, look at these. These are the leading sites of new cancer cases. These are some estimates that are coming out for 2026. You can see males, right? What's the number one there? Prostate, right? Prostate, lung, and colorectal, right? Prostate, lung, and colorectal. Okay, what about females? Breast. Breast, lung, and colorectal. Interesting. You know, prostate and lung, breast and lung, some years are interchangeable depending on the amount of smoking people are doing, right? So they may interchangeable. While the statistics sound scary, right? The most important takeaway is that roughly half of all cancer cases can be prevented. All it takes is some lifestyle changes. It can be prevented. Who wants any of this? Nobody wants this stuff, right? So you can see these sites. These are estimated. Look at the deaths. So even though we got prostate and lung and rectum, look at the deaths. So we have lung, prostate, colon, pancreas, right? Pancreas. Even though pancreas is at the bottom of the list with males, it's fourth on the list of causing death because it's hard to detect. It's hard to detect. Sometimes we don't even see it until it's too late. When the patient is jaundiced and they're having pain and all of a sudden they have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. All right. But we can prevent some of these things. You guys remember this slide right here, right? So there's some things that we can modify, but there's other things we just can't modify, right? We can't modify our age. We can't modify our ethnicity or sex. We can't modify our genetics. But certainly we can modify some things, right? All right. So even though all this for sure matters, it matters if your mom or dad had colon cancer or your siblings have some kind of cancer, right? That matters. You want to be able to say, okay, just because your mom and dad or your brother and sister had these things, we can still do everything we can to prevent it, right? Just like I was mentioning you about my father who has cardiac history, right? I just have to be a little bit more aggressive, right? And so if a family member that you have might have a certain cancer, you just have to be a little bit more aggressive in how you prevent it, right? And make sure you have that early detection. So if your mom and dad have colorectal cancer, if your siblings have colorectal cancer, or they were diagnosed at a certain age, you should be starting to have that prevention process start, right? Let's give you an example. If my mom had colon cancer at age 40, I need to start probably at age 25 to 30, right? Because I don't want to have colon cancer at age 40. I want to start before that. So guess what I'm going to be doing? Colonoscopy, right? I'm going to be doing a colonoscopy at the age of 30, right? Or even at the age of 25, maybe even sooner than that, right? So if someone in your family has some kind of cancer, start screening beforehand so that you don't get this issue. Now, modifiable things that you can do. Obviously, I don't know if there's anybody here that smokes, but this is a big area, and I'm really doing it maybe not for necessarily you guys in this. I'm talking about this because there might be people online watching this that couldn't come today, and they do have this issue. There's smoking. Do you know smoking is the leading cause of cancer death, responsible for about 85% of all lung cancers, okay? Why? What was the first thing I talked about when it comes to Anatomy 101 of how a cancer starts? DNA. What happens to the DNA? Mutates, right? It mutates, it may get injured, who knows what could happen to that DNA. What is the cause of that damage? Environmental toxins, who knows? Tobacco is one of the biggest toxins that you can get. I mean, look at this thing. It has carbon monoxide, nicotine, butane, arsenic, hydrogen cyanide, ammonia, DDT, methanol, acetone, cadmium. I mean, look at this stuff. Nobody in their right mind would think, yeah, I want to get a little bit of arsenic today. Let me just smoke some. Nobody's going to think that. A stick of tobacco, a cigarette alone contains about 7,000 chemicals. That's a lot of chemicals going right into your lungs, right? 70 of those chemicals we already know are carcinogenic. That means they injure the DNA. Who wants this? All right? You can see from tobacco smoke all the little different things that it could cause as far as cancer. Look where it reaches, right? stomach, lung, esophagus, the voice box, mouth. I have seen people who have mouth cancers that had to have half their tongue removed and radiated, that could barely talk, and still smoking. It is a wonder to me. And by the mercy of God, they're still alive. By the mercy of God. Urinary bladder. You think, what? Wait a second. Why in the world is bladder cancer when it comes to smoking? I thought it was in my lungs, right? Well, guess what you do with all that nicotine? You gotta eliminate it somehow, right? Where's it gonna go? It's got to go out. It's got to be flushed by the system, and your kidneys and your bladder have a lot to do with that. And a lot of the nicotine can actually be housed in the bladder. So people get bladder cancer. They've been smoking all their life. They're like, I don't know how I got bladder cancer. Well, I think I do. Right? So all these toxins are affecting every single cell. All right. So you have this process, right? One of the things that I want to talk about here is free radicals. I know this is kind of sounds like a punk rock band. Free radicals. No. So free radicals are things that they're atoms that are missing an electron, and they attack the cells, right? They attack the cells because they want to get an electron. They want to somehow get an electron, and they start attacking the cells to a point where it puts them in this oxidative stress. And free radicals can be anywhere, including pollution, fast food, free radicals. Imagine, okay, what was the issue? DNA disruption, right? Free radicals can disrupt the DNA, just like tobacco smoke can do that, right? So all these free radicals are disrupting the DNA. Fast food can be a source of free radicals. You know that even stress and really severe depression can actually increase free radicals in your body. And I have to say this because sometimes we overdo things, like exercise. You think, well, exercise is good for me. Yeah, but if you cause an oxidative stress, if you are stressing your body to the point where free radicals can actually start growing, having access to your body. This is intense exercise. I'll give you an example. Right now, they're having the Tour de France. Anybody know that? Anybody know what that is? Tour de France? These guys go 21 days riding like 2,000 miles a day. That is a lot of stress on your body. They have to consume, I don't know how many calories just to keep up with the demand. People are falling over, passing out. Can you imagine the amount of free radicals that they're creating? Yes, I am saying exercise is good, but sometimes we can overdo it, right? The other free radicals that can happen, of course, tobacco, drugs, and alcohol. So if you look at a free radical, they're missing an electron. And one of the things that is beautiful is that antioxidants can release an extra electron to neutralize these free radicals. These free radicals, again, will destroy the DNA, but antioxidants can actually give an electron to the free radicals, and all of a sudden the free radical can't do anything to your DNA. Wonderful, right? So where do we find these precious antioxidants? That's right, in our food. God is so good, isn't He? Look at all this colorful food that has rich of antioxidants, right? So rich with antioxidants. All right, now, the more we eat of these things, the less likely we'll have damages to our DNA from free radicals, all right? So we have to be careful. We need to increase our fruits and vegetables in our diet just because it can enhance the normal cells to just function better, right? It gives, think of it this way. You ever heard the term, you are what you eat? You heard that term all the time. Did you know that every food, everything you put in your mouth will create new cells in your body? The building block of these new cells. Now, if you put junk in, what kind of cells would you get? junk, right? If you put good in, what kind of cells will you have? You'll have good cells, good functioning cells, cells that replicate normally, cells that have good DNA, cells that have just the ability to function and last longer and do what it needs to do. So everything you eat builds the new cells that are coming up, right? So I want to talk a little bit about something here because I want to get into some other ideas about this cancer thing, right? Because there's a lot of cancers. I want to talk about some of the female cancers here, breast cancer, uterine cancer, those kind of things. One of the things that can promote things to grow is something called hormones. You've heard of those? Some people are like, I need more. No. So hormones tends to make things grow. Now, one of the things that we've been seeing over the decades is the average age of menses in a female is getting younger and younger every year. Now, it used to be where like in the 19th century, right? It was 17 years old when you have your first, what we call menstrual period. Now, if you think about this, that means hormones are building up and they are maturing the cells, right? Cells in your breast, cells in your uterus, right? All those things are maturing, right? But it used to start at the age of 17, or at least we have data that shows that it was a 17. Nowadays, what do you think the age of menses is right now? Average. 9, 10, 11 years old. Now you think about this. What's going on here? Now, if you think about what's going on with the hormone, what's going on with this hormone, and why is it, let's talk about this first. Why is it that they're starting to get menses earlier? Why is it that these hormones are coming in a little earlier? Well, a lot of it has to do with the increase in our body mass index, the increase of weight. Why? Well, the body recognizes that when you're about 17 to 20% body fat for females, guess what you can have now? A baby. When you're a young child and all of a sudden you start growing and nowadays, of course, now they're growing this way. When the body sees that you're about 17 to 20% body fat, that's perfect for a baby. And the body recognizes that and says, let's go ahead and start the menses process because we have enough fat here to start a baby. Really interesting, right? But here's the dilemma. Because they're starting earlier, right? Because they're starting earlier, they're more exposed to that estrogen at an earlier age. And as they're exposed to this estrogen or hormone or progesterone, this causes more growth. It causes growth. Now, look at this. This is a normal cell, normal breast cell, right? And here we have how hormones affect the cells. Hormones affect the cells by causing it to multiply and causing it to grow. Now, just think about that. Isn't that the exact same thing that we're looking at when it comes to cancer growth, right? Multiplies and divides and grows, right? Of course, naturally, when you have estrogen in your body, that naturally happens. But if you're exposed to that estrogen for a longer period of time, guess what? Something can go rogue as it grows and multiplies, grows and multiplies, grows and multiplies, right? And this happens every day, right? And in females, of course, it happens every month, right? All right, so look at this. Risk factors for uterine cancer, right? Women that never had a baby. Why is that? Why is it that women who never had a baby could end up with uterine cancer, right? Why is that? Well, guess what? when you have a baby, there's 9 months of zero hormone growing, hormones depleting, and it's stable, right? You don't have this on and off increase in the uterus because of that estrogen. You don't have this growth of the uterus and then the breakdown of uterus. Growth of the uterus and breakdown for 9 months. And if you breastfeed, guess what? It still doesn't happen. You don't have any menses for 9 months to maybe 2 years after that. And so, like my wife, she had 5 children. 5 children. And of course, at least 9 months, those babies were in the womb. So 9 times 5. No, that's how many months, right? And 2 years of breastfeeding every baby. That's at least 10 to 14 years of no increase in that hormone and breaking down of the uterus again every month. So guess what? No exposure during those times. That's why when someone never gives birth or never has a baby, it's a possibility that they're going to be at higher risk. Of course, drug history, we have hormones. Some people will take hormone replacements, and that could be a risk. We have family history. Of course, we talked about the menstrual periods and the age of 60 years or older, right? So we could see that some of these hormones will play out. Now, the interesting thing is we have cholesterol also involved. Cholesterol can increase hormones, those kind of things as well. Okay, guys, prostate. Prostate with a tumor, right? Prostate cancer. Same idea, especially when it comes to younger children, right? Younger children, as we get more obese, we can have more, more maturity at a younger age, exposing that prostate to more testosterone, right? And a lot of people will say, well, yeah, we continue to produce testosterone. Obviously, as we get older, the testosterone levels will drop. I like to say it's kind of interesting. Let me put this. It's actually a blessing for menopause. You're going to stone me, right? I say, what are you talking about? I'm getting hot flashes every day. No. It's a blessing that our testosterone also drops. Did you know that men and women both have testosterone and estrogen? Do you guys know that? Yeah. Obviously, as females are maturing, their estrogen is more than their testosterone. And then vice versa for males. Males have more testosterone than estrogen. Did you know as we get older, sometimes those levels kind of do this? People are like, wait. This is why when we get older, men become a little bit more emotional. And females become a little bit more like, come on, leave it alone, let's go. Get them all rough, right? Sorry, ladies, you also start to get a little bit more facial hair. And then, the men are a little bit more docile. That's why, have you ever noticed that sometimes as a couple gets older, the men look a lot younger than the females sometimes? Well, that's because they have a little bit more estrogen now. Their skin, right? I mean, it's just interesting how that happens. Of course, the moods kind of change too. The men become a little moody now, and it's a weird thing, but it's a blessing because we need that drop. Because if we didn't have that drop, we would continue to have this cellular growth in that prostate, and then guys, we wouldn't be able to pee. We could have tumors, we could have hyperplasia, we could have all these things that could happen to our prostate. Same thing for females, okay? So it's a blessing. God put it there for a reason. All right, let me skip this here. Okay, removing the sugar. Removing the sugar from our diet. Why? It causes a lot of inflammation. I got to talk to you guys. How much time do I have? I got to talk to you a little bit about inflammation here. Now think about this. Remember, what's the issue? DNA being disrupted, right? DNA can be disrupted by any inflammatory process. Now think about that. Any place that has an inflammatory process, the cells can get bigger, they can get damaged. All these things can happen in an inflammatory process, right? So, every incidence of prolonged inflammation in any part of the organ is susceptible to an issue like tumor growth or cancer growth. I'll give you an example. Anybody here heard of hepatitis? Anybody here heard hepatitis? What does the word hepa mean? Where does it go? What part of the body is that? Liver. Okay, hepatitis. Now, what does the Latin titus or itis mean? Inflammation. So we got liver inflammation. I'm glad you guys are still with me. You guys aren't bored out of your minds yet, right? Liver inflammation, right? Hepatitis. There are many things that can cause liver inflammation, hepatitis. Can you name one thing that causes liver inflammation? A drug. Yes, a drug. Very good. What else? Alcohol. Very good. What else? Sugar. Yes, of course, because you can get fatty liver because of all the excess sugar, and then you get an inflamed fatty liver. Yes, what else? I heard someone. Viruses. Yes. So if you think about this, that prolonged exposure of any inflammation, guess what? They can get primary what? Liver cancer. Do you see that? So if someone drinks alcohol all day long and then they get cirrhosis, cirrhosis are 60% greater risk of developing primary liver cancer. That means originated in the liver. Okay? Smoke too, yeah. So, anybody here heard of acid reflux? Okay, some people have acid reflux, right? Okay, so what kind of inflammation is worrisome in acid reflux? Esophageal inflammation. Can you imagine if someone has acid reflux every night? So what happens in their esophagus? Constant inflammation, constant damage, which is acidic. It can cause damage to the cells. We get all this, what we call metaplasia, then turns into dysplasia, and then turns into esophageal cancer. Does it make sense now? This is why when something happens to our body, we got to be mindful of that. Because any process of inflammation can directly affect. And so sugar is a pro-inflammation. Do we want any more inflammation? No, we don't want any more inflammation. You know, one of the things that is interesting to me is how they invented the PET scan. Anybody ever been through a PET scan before? Pretty neat. Anybody know who Michael Phelps is? Who's Michael Phelps? No, he's not. That's Michael Phelps. Yeah. So Michael Phelps is one of the originators of the PET scan, right? And him with two other colleagues, they invented this thing. Did you know how they figured this out? They figured it out because cancer cells take up or absorb 13% more sugar than regular cells. Remember, they're trying to grow. They're trying to proliferate. They don't have any breaks. They want to grow. They want to multiply. That means they're going to feed. And they decided, what do we do? What happens if we take a glucose molecule and we attach it to a radioisotope? Something that lights up, right? So that's what they did. They attached a glucose molecule to a radioisotope and they sent it through the body. And guess what? When they took a picture, they have hot spots. The spots that light up. Why? Because cancer cells take up more sugar or more glucose than other cells. And then they say, oh, the primary cancer is here, but it's here, here, and here. And that's how they figure things out. Okay? Of course, now a PET scan can include other types of molecules that they attach a radioisotope, but that was the beginning of it, right? All right. So what do we want to do? If we have cancer, or if someone has told us, hey, there's a tumor or there's a bad growth, do we really want to add fuel to that? No, not at all. So get the pro-inflammatory cancer feeder, sugar, out of your diet if you can. Refined sugars especially. And I'm not talking about a piece of fruit. I'm talking about these refined sugars. Okay, let's go beyond Michael Phelps here. and go to the colon cancer. All right. This is the types of cancers that we see in the office a lot, okay? Now, one of the things that I want to mention here is what happens in colon cancer. Why does this arise? Now, remember, what did I say in the beginning? What's happening? Damage to where? DNA. Okay, I really want you guys to think about that a lot. Can you see? Okay, what could damage DNA in the colon? Out of all the things. Thank you. Thank you, Ernie. Poop. Stool. Right? Stool. Now, okay, what's going on here? So what we really didn't want to do, and I added this slide just last night because I really want you guys to think about this. Foods that are high fibrous foods like fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, there's two types of fibers in there. One called soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Okay, it's kind of a weird term. Soluble meaning water, it can be dissolved in water. Insoluble means it just really absorbs water but doesn't get dissolved in water. Does that make sense? You need them both. You need them both. Soluble and insoluble fiber. Why? Why do we need this stuff? Well, the insoluble fiber is the one that says, go, go, go. And then you can go to the bathroom without an eye-popping experience and feel great because you feel empty, okay? But the soluble fiber it's going to contain a lot of little nutrients for things called bacteria in the gut. Bacteria in the gut we have a symbiotic relationship with bacteria in our gut. You heard of good bacteria in the gut, probiotics, the flora. There is so much information right now on the biome of your gut. It's incredible. I mean, this is going to explode. But let's take it simply, right? Let's go a little bit more simpler. If bacteria in your gut don't have some of this fiber, some of this insoluble fiber that has nutrients in it, it'll start processing other things. It'll start processing things like proteins and all kinds of other stuff. And the dilemma with that is the bacteria in your gut start producing toxins, right? As these toxins are produced, like ammonia and nitrates and all kinds of stuff, they actually affect the cells of your colon. All right, fiber is amazing. Why? Because one, it dilutes toxins. It absorbs water, dilutes the toxins, so it's not as bad. You don't get that exposure with those toxins to your cells. That's what you want, right? You don't want that damage to the DNA. The other thing is, fiber helps improve transit time. So now you don't get all that stool doesn't stay in for 48, 56 hours at a time. I mean, I'm talking to people every day that have 1 week, 2 weeks without having a bowel movement. Do you know how damaging that is to your bowels? Do you know how many toxins are building up in your bowels? This is why constipation and those kind of things can be detrimental to your colon health. Why? Because these toxins are constantly bombarding, inflaming the tissue, causing growths for polyps, okay? And if you have a hereditary issue with that, then this could be a problem. So we're starting to understand, right, a little bit about how this process works. So that's why it's so important not only just to prevent and going to do your colonoscopies, doing your pre-checks, breast exams, mammograms, whatever you want to, you have to also start preventing this stuff, avoiding things, drinking more water, doing exercise, eating right, so that you don't get this DNA damage, okay? All right, now I want to talk a little bit. Oh man, it's 8 o'clock already. Can I keep going just for a little bit? It'll be quick. Okay, thank you. All right, caution. All right, remember this acronym, caution. Why? Caution, C-A-U-T-I-O-N, caution. These are some of the symptoms that you could remember So just in case you happen to have these symptoms, but I will make a caution. Just because you have one of these symptoms doesn't mean you have cancer. Don't come out of here saying, oh, Ricky said I have cancer. No. But if you do have one of these symptoms, guess what? All you need to do is go set up an appointment with your doctor, right? And get the necessary screenings that you need to do. Okay, caution, C, standing for changes in bowel or bladder habits. So if you have changes in your bowel habits, if you have changes in your bladder habits, you need to see someone, okay? Bladder habits could be prostate issues, changes in your bowels could be issues with your colon, those kind of things. It could be even issues with your pancreas too, by the way. All right, C stands for changes in bowel habits. A stands for a sore that does not heal. Okay? I know that as we get older, things heal a little bit longer, but a sore that does not heal in the mouth, in the skin, or elsewhere. So A stands for a sore that does not heal. U stands for unusual bleeding or discharge from any body opening, including things like discharge from the urine, discharge in the vaginal area, especially if you've already gone through menopause. If you've already gone through menopause and you're not supposed to be bleeding anymore, if you have bleeding, you need to go to the doctor. There could be something else growing in there that's causing that bleeding. The T, right? The T stands for thickening or a lump in the breast or testicle or anywhere else in the body. I remember one day I had this patient sitting in my office, just here for, I've got a little acid reflux. And I'm doing a physical exam on him, right? And all of a sudden he's sitting on the table, right? And he's got a bulge on his leg. And at first I thought, well, maybe it's his, what? Wallet? Right? That's what I thought at first. He has a bulge in his leg right here. And I say, what's that? And he says, it's nothing really. I say, what do you mean nothing really? What, is it your wallet? No, it's not my wallet. So what is it? Just something on my leg. I said, let me see your leg. Right? So I look at his leg and he's got a lump, it looked like a cantaloupe on his leg. And I said, you came in here for acid reflux and you never told me that you had a lump on your leg? Have you told anybody? No. Turns out the gentleman had a sarcoma, which is a cancer. Unfortunately, it was too late because that went to his liver. And he said it started out this big and it grew this big. And I'm thinking, why didn't you say anything? Look, say something. You got something that feels weird? Check it out. It's okay to do that. All right, so a thickening or a lump of the breast. I stands for indigestion or difficulty swallowing. Of course, we think of esophageal cancer, of those kind of things. So indigestion, too much indigestion, or difficulty swallowing. You may want to consider an endoscopy just to check things out. O stands for obvious change in a wart or a mole or a birthmark. This is a birthmark that maybe you've had, obviously, since birth. You've seen it all the time. But now there's a change. There's an obvious change. This looks different now, right? And of course, N stands for a nagging cough, a voice change, or persistent hoarseness, all right? So caution, think all of those acronyms. I'm going to add another one, U, unexplained weight loss. So that's another one that you want to look out for. So just because you have some of these symptoms doesn't mean you have cancer, but it does mean you may want to ask your doctor. You may want to do some further testing. You may want to consider looking at this a little bit further. Now, one of the things I love about the human body is the way it reminds me about Christ. Because the human body is so awesome because when a cancer cell, a rogue cancer cell comes in, the body tries to get rid of it. The immune system and the white blood cells come in and try to engulf this weird cell. But think about this. Here's a weird cell, doesn't want to play by the rules. It's rebelling against the natural body of or natural order of things in the body. And then it starts getting others to come along with him. You see where I'm going with this? And it starts growing a company, right? You know, the interesting thing about cancer is eventually it'll kill itself because it doesn't have a host anymore. It'll kill the host, but it's self-destruct. I mean, it's so selfish. It goes into places it doesn't need to go. It's so selfish, right? That it kills itself in the process of wanting more and getting more and this and that and the other. But I'm here to tell you that the same thing happens in our life with sin, right? And the Bible tells us here in 1 John 3:5, and you know that he was manifest to take away our sin, and in him is no sin. Those white blood cells remind me of the righteousness of Christ that want to take away or get rid or cover our sin, that cancer of sin, right? Do you want that? I want that. I mean, we could survive cancer, but if we still have sin, we can't survive that. It self-destructs, right? Eventually, we'll end up in a place we don't want to be. And all it takes is us accepting Christ and his righteousness and asking for forgiveness, and that cancer called sin is gone. That, to me, is more hopeful than someone giving me a, hey, you're cancer-free. To me, I want to be sin-free. I want my sin to be gone. And I want to see Jesus one day. How about you?